All right, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect. And doing this video on the fact that our prayers are heard before Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. And what inspired me to do this video is because, you have ups and downs in this truth. You have moments where you're on fire, and then you have moments where you're battling to stay on fire. And throughout all that, we remember to pray. We remember to pray, and prayer. It just I think about it, how prayer takes patience. Prayer takes a lot of patience because essentially we're communicating with the higher being our desire, and it's ultimately fulfilled based upon his desire. But like the scriptures, like Yahweh Shai said, let your will be done, not my will. And Lord willing, I'll get that. But prayer, I've just been thinking how prayer takes patience. And, your prayers got to align with, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai's will for your life. But our prayers are ultimately heard. Our prayers are heard, man. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai hears what we have to say. And I'm going to get a couple examples of that in the scriptures, and I'm going to summarize them because it's important to just keep in mind how, your prayers are heard. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai hears your prayer, but it's going to be answered on his time. And that's something that you really have to keep in mind. All your prayers are answered on on Yahweh's time. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai's time, not your time. So when you pray, you always have to keep that in mind. Your prayers are heard, but your prayers are answered on his time. So this is Luke 1, and I'm going to start at 11. It says, "And there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard." You see, for thy prayer is heard. "And thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. And thou shalt have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth." You see, so, I looked up a little summary on ChatGPT, and I said, the angel tells Zechariah not to be afraid because God has heard his prayer. His wife Elizabeth, despite being old and previously unable to have children, will give birth to a son. The child is to be named John the Baptist. So when you read this, the angel reassured Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist. He reassured him that that prayer is heard. And these are important things when, it's like it's only 3 words in the scriptures, man. It's only 3 words. Thy prayer is heard. It's only 4 words. But, those words carry a lot of purpose and meaning when you read it. Because so often, I've had thoughts like, man, this prayer is taking forever. Or, you pray for something and you want it to be answered ASAP. You want it to be prayed. You pray for it and you want it to be answered immediately. But that's not how Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai works. The Lord is going to answer your prayer. He's definitely going to answer it, but he's going to answer it on his time. But ultimately, all of our prayers are heard. And as you see right here, Zechariah's prayer was heard. This is an example of how your prayer is heard, but it's going to take time. It's going to be done on Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai's time. It's not going to be done on your time. You may pray, to get a new car. You may pray like you need a new job, but a whole year may go by. A whole year may go by where you're doing odd jobs and you may be struggling for a little bit. But ultimately, as soon as you need it, as soon as things are about to take a turn for the worse, then you get that job that you were praying for. And that's just how the Lord works, man. That's just how it works. Everything is answered according to his time and not our time. So you got to keep that in mind. Your prayer is heard, but it's heard on his time frame. Now let's get another scripture showing you that the Lord hears our prayer. Acts 10, and I'm going to start at 30. It says, "And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, And at the ninth hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing. An angel, see, it says, and said, Cornelius, thy prayer is heard, and thine alms are had in remembrance in the sight of God. So Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, not only does he hear our prayers, but he remembers our good deeds. You know, there's multiple scriptures that show you that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai remembers your good deeds. You know, every time you give alms and tithes to the church, every time you help out a brother or a sister, every time you do a good deed, you show charity, you show faith to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, despite the hard times, he remembers those times, man. And our prayers are basically like a reward. You know, he hears what you're begging to him, and he's going to reward you in due time. Just as he heard Cornelius and Zechariah's prayer, your prayer is being heard before Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. But you have to keep in mind that, you know, he's a God managing the whole order flow of this world. You know, I'm trying to put into words what I'm thinking is like, essentially, we all live on a planet, and you know, all of us are praying for things constantly every second. But obviously, there has to be a specific order in which the prayers are answered. You know, you can't just pray to get rich and then immediately money starts falling, you know, coming out of the sky. Like, no, something has to happen in the world, in this world's order. And, you know, essentially, I guess what I'm saying is your prayers are answered, but everything takes time in its proper order. You know, imagine if you had to govern millions, billions of people's prayers. You know what I mean? Well, he only listens to the elect's prayer anyway. So millions of people's prayers, you know, you would answer them, but, you know, you got to do it in a specific order. It's got to be done in a specific order. So Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, he definitely hears what you're saying, man. But your prayer is answered in its order. You know what I mean? You got to keep that in mind. If you're getting impatient, you got to keep in mind that your prayer is answered in its order. You know, it's not always going to be done immediately. And that's why I'll get this next scripture. Luke 22:42. And this is Yahweh Shai. Right? It says, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So Yahweh Shai is the ultimate example of during his darkest hour, during his hardest time in life, he prayed to Yahweh to remove this cup from him. Meaning, you know, when he had to go up on the cross, he prayed so that, you know, he prayed that he didn't have to go through it, essentially. But at the end of his prayer, he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So he acknowledged the fact that even what he's praying for may not be the will of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Now, the question is, are you acknowledging that in your prayer? Are you acknowledging that your prayer, it may not be Yahweh's will? It may not be Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai's will. Are you acknowledging that, man? You know what I mean? Do you understand that? Whenever I pray, at the end of my prayer, I normally always say, let your will be done. You know? Because you may pray for something, but that may, essentially, it may not be good for you. You know, it may not be good for you. Like the scriptures say, I think it goes like all things lawful are not expedient. You know, hey, you may pray for something, but Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai knows best. He knows that ultimately whatever you're praying for just may not be good for you, man. You know what I mean? You know, everybody can't handle the same thing. You know, you may want what someone else has, but are you able to handle that? Are you able to handle what they have? You know what I mean? So nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So it's all about Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai's will. You got to acknowledge that it's Yahweh's will when you pray. You know what I mean? So when you pray, you're like, hey, I pray I get this new job, but let your will be done. Whole time at that job, it may be full of people that you ultimately wouldn't have gotten along with. And the Lord foreseen that. So he kept that from you. He kept that job from you and made you stay patient so that you can wait and get a different job. You know what I'm saying? Or you may pray to get one specific job, but there's another, but the Lord has prepared for you a even better job with more pay, but you just didn't see it. So you didn't, that essentially what you asked for that specific job, but it didn't happen. But then he ended up giving you something even better. You know, that's the way prayer goes. It's all Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai's will. So you got to keep that in mind. This is 1 John 5:14. And this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he heareth us. You see, if we ask anything according, it made sure to say according to his will. It has to be according to the will of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. You know what I mean? You can't pray for Esau to be saved. That's just not according to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai's will. That prayer is not going to be heard. It's not going to be answered. It's not according to his will. You know what I mean? So you got to pray, but when it's important, always make this a spiritual routine. When you pray, you say, let it be in your will. All right. If it's your will, that's what I always say at the end of my prayers. I always say, if it's your will, I'll pray for something and I'll say, let your will be done. I'll read this again, 1 John 5:14. And this is the confidence with faith that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he heareth us. So Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai hears you, man. He hears your prayers, man. Don't think that he doesn't hear you crying out to him. Because I have personal experience, man. You pray to the Lord, but it just feels like it's taking forever. Your prayers may take years to get answered, man. Remember, we live in a different dimension than Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. So time flows differently. He's not looking at this. He's not looking at this realm of time the same as you. You may pray for something and when you pray, you're like, Lord, I need it now. But whole time you're going to get it 5 years later. That's just how the Lord works. Your prayers are still ultimately going to be answered. Because he hears us. Like the scriptures just say, he heareth us. Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai hears you, man. He hears you crying out. And I just remembered another scripture. How's it go? Yeah, I found it. The water Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Matthew 6:8. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask of him. That's heavy, man. That's heavy. Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai knows what you need before you even ask, man. So whole time there's things that we need that we're not even asking Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. There's things that we need that we simply, be forgetting. We forget sometimes. But the Lord still knows what we need, and he still answers the groaning of our spirit. There's a scripture in Corinthians, I think it's in Corinthians, that basically says your spirit groans, man. Like inside of your mind, inside of your temple, your spirit, man, like your actual spirit groans to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. I forget how that scripture goes. But Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, he sees all of that, man. And he sees the past, present, and the future. He sees everything. So Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, he knows what things you need of before you even ask him. So the next time you think that your prayers are taking forever to get answered, just know that the Lord already knew you needed that. Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai already knew that you needed that prayer answered. And he's just waiting to answer it on his time frame, man. So that's one of my favorite scriptures right there. Now this is Psalm 6:9. I am weary with my groaning. All the night I make my bed. Hold on. Okay, yeah. Psalm 6:9. I am weary with my groaning. All the night I make my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. So King David, was going through it, man. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all mine enemies. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. You see, the Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. And this goes for all of us. Yahweh Hashem Yahushai hears our prayers. He hears your, when you be groaning and when you be like, damn, or fuck, or shit, that's the groaning that I'm talking about. That's your spirit crying to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. When you be full of grief, you're just like, God damn. You know what I mean? You're like, shit, damn it. That be your spirit crying out to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, man. Things that words can't utter. The scripture, I'm starting to remember a little bit of it now. But that be your spirit, man. And that's what King David said. He said, I am weary with my groaning. Let's look at that word groaning. Anacha. And it says sighing, groaning, expression of grief or physical distress, sighing. So, whenever you be sighing and when you be groaning, man, you're really crying out to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. Because a prayer just means to beg. So you don't got to necessarily beg in words. You just be like, man, or damn. You know what I mean? And then you be like, but sometimes I pray quick. Sometimes I pray really fast. Because in my head, I'm like, man, the Lord already knows what I'm saying. Sometimes I don't say a full sentence. Sometimes I'm just like, Baba Kasha, and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? The Lord knows what I'm saying, man. Sometimes I'm just like, Baba Kasha, and that's it. Like, if I'm, I may be working or I may be doing something where I don't necessarily have the time to throw up a longer prayer. So sometimes I'm just like, Baba Kasha. And I know whatever thoughts that I had in my head at that moment, that Yahweh Hashem Yahushai heard those thoughts. I know that to be true, So prayer is powerful, man. Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, the Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. So Yahweh Hashem Yahushai hears our prayers, man. And I bear witness to prayers being answered, man. I bear witness to my prayers being answered. I had just a quick testimony. I had legal trouble. Some stuff happened in my life. I prayed. The camp prayed. My family prayed to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. And the Lord delivered me. The Lord delivered me from what I was going through, man. Worked on the minds of the people, and delivered me. You know what I mean? Quickly, speedily. I've had prayers get answered immediately, and I've had prayers get answered months away, months after I prayed, years after I prayed. But I've had prayers get answered, immediately, man. Like small things. Like I may lose my credit card or something like that. I pray, like, Lord, Baba Kasha, let me find this. And like 5 minutes later, I find it. It may be a small thing, but that's your prayer getting answered. Maybe small, but that's your prayer getting answered. And the Lord does that on a much grander scale over a period of time in your life. He answers all your prayers and he hears your supplication. So this is Psalms. This is the last scripture, Psalm 66 and 19. It says, but verily the Most High hath heard me. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be the Most High, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from me. So again, this is just King David iterating that Yahweh Hashem Yahushai hears his prayer, man. And the Lord hears your prayer too. You know what I mean? We can all be likened unto David. So Yahweh Hashem Yahushai hears your prayer, but he's going to answer it on his time. So Lord willing, this video was edifying. Till the next time, Shalom.